Okay, so today we're going to talk about Language Paper 1, Question 5. It's the creative writing part of our paper. We've already done the reading section. We spent an hour on that. We've answered 4 questions on that. And then we've got another 45 minutes, having spent an hour already. We've got 45 minutes to do a piece of creative writing. Now, this is worth half the marks for your whole of English Language Paper 1, right? The creative writing, and it's just 1 question. So we've got to make sure we know exactly what we've got to do to get marks. Now, writing a decent piece of writing and getting marks are 2 slightly different things. And in this video, I'm going to tell you all the things that you need to be hitting, easy ways of doing them, and things you can do to practice to make sure that you're completely prepared for anything that question 5 can throw at you. So let's have a look at it. Here's an example question from the example from AQA. And we've got 2 different tasks that we can pick between. We can do one of 2 different tasks. First off, there's a picture up at the top, and in this case, the question for the picture is describe a marketplace as suggested by this picture, and there's our picture. Or it says down at the bottom, we could pick write a story with the title abandoned, right? Now, you'll always get a picture and a task. And there are generally 2 different types of writing. There's description and there's narrative or storytelling writing, right? You won't necessarily always get a description and a story. You might get 2 descriptions, you might get 2 stories, but you will always get a picture and a task. So I'm going to break down how we go about approaching this question, why we go about approaching it in this way. I'm going to give you practical tips and small revision exercises that you can do quickly that are going to train you to get fantastic marks in this question, okay? Let's have a look at our mark scheme. I've said we've got 40 marks for this paper, so half the marks for the whole paper, 40 marks for this particular question, and it's broken down into 2 different sections: 24 marks for the actual content and ideas of the writing, and 16 marks for the accuracy of the writing. Here's how the mark scheme tells you how you get those marks. This is the top level criteria from the mark scheme for the 24 and 16 marks, but it's all written in kind of education management speak, mark scheme kind of speak. I've simplified it into these questions, right? So does it suit the task up at the top? Have you chosen ambitious vocabulary? Have you used language devices? Have you structured it well? Are your sentences accurate and varied? Have you used a variety of punctuation accurately? Is the spelling correct? And have you used vocabulary well? Those are all questions you want to be asking about your pieces of writing, right? First thing we do whenever we come to a piece of writing is we spend the first 5 minutes planning out our piece of writing. The reason is those more important marks, the 24 marks up at the top, so we've got more marks for these questions up at the top. Does it suit the task, and have you structured it well, both in that box up at the top? Our plan is going to help you hit that, help the really important bits for those different bits. So let's talk about how we might go about planning, right? I'm going to take our example question, right, with our description and our story, and I'm going to show you what I do to plan either of those questions. So we get a good idea of planning for the picture, planning for the task down at the bottom. We get a good idea of what you do to plan for a description, what you do for planning for a story. Let's take the story first down at the bottom, right? Now, what we're not after with a story is tons and tons and tons of events. We don't want loads of plot, right? A lot of the examples that AQA have given us in the past are really simple stories. You want to focus on a simple thing happening, right? Don't put too many characters in there where you've got to explain stuff. I wouldn't put too much speech in there either. We want something nice and simple, right? Where we've got a clear beginning, middle and end to the story, okay? And we can do lots of description, because description is where the meat of the marks are, right? Okay, so I'll give you an example plan that I might go for. All I'm going to do is bullet point 3 different things: a beginning, middle, end to the story. Nice and simple. So our story is write a story with the title Abandoned. Here's my plan for the story. I'm going to have a story written from the perspective of a teddy, right? Perspective of a teddy being hugged by a toddler. It's the toddler's favourite teddy. We're going to write from that perspective, right? So the teddy is with the toddler in the pushchair to start off with. Right, in the middle of the story, the teddy's going to fall out of the pushchair, and at the end, a stranger is going to return the teddy to the toddler. Now that seems super ridiculous, right? It's too simple. It's a ridiculous story. Nothing happens in that, right? But you can get really great marks with this plan. It's got a nice, clear structure, right? Something happens. We've got an event in the middle. We've got something to tie it up at the end. It's got a clear beginning, middle, and end. We have structured it well, right? And I'm going to show you how you go about doing that and getting more marks by adding detail to that plan. So that should take you to come up with the idea, right? Take you a few minutes to do it. You've still got a couple of minutes of planning time. In that time, what you want to do is add descriptive detail to each of these sections. We're not looking to add more events to each of them, but we're looking to think about, right, if I'm going to describe that happening, how can I do it really, really well? And how can I hit that criteria from before? Okay. So if you look at this plan here, I've added a bunch of detail to it, right? On that first bit, when the teddy is in the toddler, is with the toddler in the pushchair, we're going to talk about the sweaty grip of the toddler. We're going to talk about the soft jumper and kind of snuggling into that soft jumper. We're going to say that it smells like home and cuddles. Now, the reason we're doing that is we're going to get loads of good description in there. We've got a language device, we've got a simile that we're going to use in there. Let's flick back to our criteria, right? Have you chosen ambitious vocabulary? Well, if we're doing lots of description, we are going to hit ambitious vocabulary, right? Have we used language devices and used them well, right? We want to come up with ones that are not particularly cliched. So smells like home and cuddles is a really an interesting kind of bit of description, right? We're already hitting some of that stuff up at the top, right? Middle section is going to fall out of the chair, but we're going to make that seem super dramatic. We're going to feel the rush of air as he heads towards the pavement. The terror is going to flood his veins, okay, using that metaphorical language, again, hitting those language devices. And then the wet, cold pavement is going to hit him as he reaches the bottom, right? That last bit, again, we're going to add loads of tension, make it really dramatic, really descriptive. So the stranger reaches down, he can feel a hideous monster claw grabbing around him. He's in a desperate struggle with this monster. And then the stranger's just going to go, is this yours at the end? And hand it back, and everything's going to be resolved, right? So again, it's nicely structured, right? It feels like something panic and desperate is coming, and then suddenly we've got this like switch at the end and everything's all right, okay? It's a simple story. It doesn't have to be complicated, but I've got tons of opportunity to do description with ambitious vocabulary, use language devices. It's got a nice structure to it, and we know that it suits the task because this is a story. It's got events in it, right? This thing moves to this thing, moves to this thing. That's what we've got to do to suit our task. If we're suiting our description on the other side, right, so if we're answering that does it suit the task thing, if we're writing a description, it's slightly different. We still want 3 bullet points, but this time we don't want events. We don't want something leading to another thing, leading to another thing, because then we're going to get into a story and we haven't suited it to our task. Okay, so if we look at our description, we've got our marketplace here. Best way of doing a description is to think of 3 different sections, 3 different things you're going to zoom in on. So in this case, we could talk about the whole market, right, and describe the atmosphere as we walk into it, the noise, the clutter. Use your senses as much as possible when you're describing stuff. So what can you hear, what can you smell, what can you see? Get into as much detail about what you can see as possible. Once we talked about the whole atmosphere, maybe we'll zoom in on a particular stall, right? If we zoom into one stall on the side, we can start describing the fruit in the stall. Again, be very specific with it. Think about little language devices or bits of ambitious vocabulary you can put in there to describe little details about it. Are there slightly rotten bits on some of the fruits? Is there a fly buzzing around it? Do some of the fruits look particularly shiny and delicious, right? Try and think about little details you can put in there. And once we've got that, maybe we zoom in again on our stall holder. Okay, so then we describe this person, and again, as much detail as possible. What's their face like? What's their personality like? What they dress like? If they've got a cardigan on, has it got a little rip in it? Any little detail you can put in there is going to help you with description, push your vocabulary. That's what we want. Okay, so again, nice simple plan. We're going to talk about the whole market, then we're going to talk about a stall, then we're going to talk about a market trader. 3 different sections. In our plan as well, we're going to put loads and loads of bits of detail in there. Let's go back to our criteria. Once we've got our plan in place, we're going to make sure as we're writing, we push the vocabulary as much as possible, right? So we've got ambitious vocabulary for that top one. We've used language devices. We know we're going to use similes, metaphors, all of that kind of thing, right? We know we've got a clear structure because we've planned it out. Down at the bottom, we also need to be thinking about this, right? As we're writing, are your sentences accurate and varied? Easiest way of doing this, longer descriptive sentences. At the end or the start of a paragraph, stick a short dramatic paragraph in there. 2 or 3 words making a dramatic point. You've used a sentence for a particular effect. You get marks for doing it. And have we varied punctuation, right? So not just full stops and commas. So we sometimes put a question mark, sometimes an exclamation mark. Not hundreds of them, just 1 or 2 in different places, right? Lastly, what we've got to make sure we're doing, right, is checking our work. Last 5 minutes, you go through and you read what you've got and you make sure that you're pushing your marks up as much as possible. One of our questions down at the bottom, is the spelling correct? So we can check that. But also, you'll notice in the accuracy bits, have we used vocabulary well? So do our sentences kind of make sense? Have we picked the right word for the right occasion? We've got a chance in that last 5 minutes to go through. If there's a word we don't like, cross it out, add in a new one. If we can make it ambitious, we're going to get those marks up at the top. That's ideal.